Welcome to this introduction to the New Hampshire Confession of Faith. Let me explain what a statement of faith is, where it comes from, why we do it, and why we picked this one. A statement of faith is actually it's simply just a condensed summary of what the Bible teaches. It's an outline of what we believe the Bible says. And this impulse to do such a thing is actually in the Bible itself. Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 1:13 to follow the pattern of sound words, which you have heard from me. So creeds and confessions provide a pattern of sound words. That's what they are. Everyone operates with this. We all have a pattern of sound words kind of in our head, a distillation of what we believe the Bible teaches on certain points. So it's wise and good to, as a church, be explicit about these and have them written down. So we can be unified around a particular pattern of sound words. It's a statement of faith, or a confessional statement, as it's sometimes called. Church history reveals the importance of having these statements of faith. Early on, the Apostles' Creed was formulated, and then there were other creeds that came afterwards, like the Nicene Creed, the Athanasius Creed, to combat certain false teachings. As the gospel was being rediscovered in the time of the Reformation, there were several confessions of faith that were written down and spread and used for teaching this pattern of sound words. For example, on the continent of Europe, there was the Belgic Confession, which circulated in the 1500s. As the Reformation spread to the English-speaking world, more confessions were written and used. The most famous and probably the greatest of all of them was the Westminster Confession of Faith in 1646. And at this time, the Baptist movement was growing in England, and they basically took the Westminster Confession of Faith, adapted it slightly with their Baptist twist, and published it in 1689 and called it the Second London Baptist Confession. Largely the Westminster Confession baptized, essentially. And then as Baptists spread to North America, so did the Second London Confession. It became known here as the Charleston Confession in the south of Philadelphia, Confession in the north. And as great as this statement was, it was still very cumbersome and large and long. So in 1833, the New Hampshire Baptist Convention adopted a statement that was considered to be in harmony with the Second London Confession, but more concise and milder, more manageable. It's become known as the New Hampshire Confession of Faith. It had a few articles added in 1853, and different bodies have tweaked a few places in it over time, but it remains to this day the most widely used, recognized, held to statement of faith among Baptists in America. It forms the basis of the Baptist Faith and Message for the Southern Baptist Convention. And so at Emmanuel Baptist Church, we're going to be using the revised New Hampshire Confession of Faith with an addition from the Baptist Faith and Message 2000 on the family. We're going to use these two things together as a pattern of sound words to guide us and summarize elegantly what we believe. So here's some particular specific reasons why we've identified with this particular statement. Number one, we believe that it gives an accurate theological synopsis of key biblical doctrines, that it's true to the Bible. So first reason, it's theologically sound. Number two, we want to be identified with the historic church. We don't want to make something up out of the blue on our own that's ours. And so the New Hampshire Confession is something that does that. It stood the test of time. It situates us clearly and firmly in a stream of historic Christianity that runs back through the English Reformation to the Continental Reformation, finds its fountainhead in the ancient creeds of the early church. So number two, it's old. Third reason is that we want to hold to a confession that's used widely by many churches, not just ours, something that puts us in contact and reminds us that we're part of something bigger. So unique when it comes to a statement of faith is not good. Many like-minded churches have the New Hampshire Confession as their statement of faith. It's also, I found this interesting, it's also adhered to by historically black Baptist churches in America. So it can provide a common ground for unity among racial diversity in our country. So number 3, it's more universal. And then number 4, we want to hold to a confession that's theologically robust, that's meaty, and yet still at the same time concise. Since it was written in an earlier day, it retains the theological seriousness and precision that has been lost in much of the contemporary church, and yet it is not as narrow or as verbose as something like the Second London Confession. So it balances comprehensiveness with being concise. Finally, one last word here. We added an article about the family, since this is an important biblical teaching that wasn't an issue in 1833 but needs to be clearly articulated in our age. But again, here, we didn't come up with our own wording and write our own statement, but we deferred to the wording of our broader association of churches, taking it straight out of the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. So that's a little orientation to the purpose of statements of faith and why we use what we do. Now let's walk through each article one by one.